Yeah, I think we're on.
Oh, it's a fun. Okay, we've got a couple coming in. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our webinar series on ideas, insights, and innovation, an introduction to user-centered design. My name is Nick Bridgepole, and I work for the Belfast Met in business development. And today we have with us Damien McElroy, who is the part-time lecturer in product design and engineering. Damien provides product development, design, and R&D consultancy to a wide range of SMEs in various sectors, as well as delivery in product design and NPD areas for the Belfast Met as a part-time lecturer. He has a wealth of knowledge in the areas of engineering, design, and manufacturing. His focus is a user-centered design viewpoint, and he brings with him vast knowledge in areas of innovation and R&D through time spent with Invest in I, working in the Innovation, Research, and Technology Division. So without further delay, I'd like to hand you over to Damien, who will now start the presentation. Thank you, Damien.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Are we good to go? Have we everyone in?
Yeah, we're good to go. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks very much, Nick, for the intro. I'll, as Nick's already said, I suppose the focus of this morning is or this afternoon even, is ideas, insights, and innovation. So it's really focused around user-centered design. Nick's already given me the big intro, so we'll not dwell too much on that. So if everyone's in, we'll begin. I'm a wee bit miffed that my animations aren't working, so we didn't get the full Alan Partridge innovation, or the animation. But I suppose we're starting here because a lot of the conversations around innovation and things start with the idea, and I'm sure a lot of you are in this webinar because you've got a product idea or a business idea or something you'd like to develop. And a lot of these discussions start around the idea. But I suppose the idea is really already part of the solution. So instead of that, we want to start at the beginning. Okay, so what's your problem? So really, instead of starting with the idea, what we're looking at is what your problem is. What problem? Start with the problem and what problem you're trying to solve. Okay, what problem requires a solution? What do people want solved? And how do you know it's a problem? Okay, so I think if you're all on, there should be a chat function along the side. And if you can see that, so we've just got this little example. What does this person need? So just pop it into the chat. What do you think this person needs? No wrong answers. And the first thing that comes to your head, you want to drop in the chat. What does this person need? And don't be shy. There's no right or wrong answers here. Okay, we're getting a couple. Just give it a minute and we'll see what sort of answers we're getting. Okay, so we're getting a shorter bookshelf, a computer, longer arms. Okay, well, very good. I suppose the obvious one you normally get is a ladder. You know, people go, "Oh, we need a ladder." So things like a ladder are a solution. Platform shoes is another solution. But I suppose the point we're trying to make is think of this as what our need is. So our need is to reach, as opposed to what the solution is, which is a ladder or platform shoes. So if you think of it in those terms, she needs to reach. it opens you up to all sorts of solutions rather than focusing you in one solution from the very start. So maybe the answer is the latter. Maybe it is lower shelves. Maybe it is a bionic arm or a trampoline or platform shoes or whatever. But if you open it up and think of it in those terms, it opens you up to an awful lot more solutions than just thinking, directly thinking of a solution. So think of a need as a verb as opposed to a noun. So then when you think about why, it opens things up again. So why does she want a book? Why does she need to reach? And then when you think of it in those terms, maybe the solution isn't a ladder. Maybe the solution is a computer, like someone else said, or a Kindle, or a library card. It just opens things up to a real broad, wide ranging opportunity. Okay, so I know that's a wee bit abstract, but hopefully it gets the point across. So there's a really famous quote, I suppose, from Theodore Levitt that sort of sums that up. People don't want a quarter ounce hole, they don't want a quarter ounce drill, they want a quarter ounce hole. So people don't really want a drill. What they want is a method of putting a hole in the wall. And when you think about it a little further, they don't really even want a hole in the wall. They just want a way of putting up a picture or fixing some bookshelves up. So if someone come up with a different way of putting a quarter ounce hole in the wall, that'll be the end of drill bits. So people, it's focusing in on what the need is as opposed to what the first solution that comes to mind is. So if we think of it in the business world, I mean, there's loads of sort of examples of this. Of Kodak, for example, forgot that people didn't necessarily want photographs; they just wanted a way of capturing memories. And taxi companies sort of forgot that it's not about the taxi; it's just a convenient way of getting from A to B. Record companies, people didn't necessarily want records; they just wanted, music. They wanted a method of getting listening to music. So that's not to say that there isn't still a place for physical photographs and for taxi firms and for vinyl records. There's still a market for those. But when people looked at the problem in terms of the need, they were able to open up a new market and a slightly different take on it. So things like Instagram, things like Uber, things like Spotify. So I suppose the point from that is try and understand the problem or need before you get to solutions. So how do you do that? So design, I suppose, isn't lightning in a bottle. There's a bit of a process to it. It's not just about having this inspirational idea that ends up, making your millions. There's a process behind it and working through the process. So you need the creativity to feed into it, but there's a process that you can follow. So it can get a wee bit overwhelming and complicated when you start to look at all the examples are out there and loads of acronyms and terms and stuff around design thinking and user-centered design and human-centered design and all sorts of things like that. But the one that I find that sort of captures it quite nicely and is quite easily followed is the double diamond. So it comes from the Design Council, and it's sort of widely accepted now as a method that can be used right across design, from product till service till in software, in all sorts of areas. The double diamond can be applied. So we'll run through it quite quickly. This will be a really crash course in it, I suppose, but it's just to touch on a few aspects of it and pull out the sort of user focus end of things. So, sorry, I'm just trying to operate two screens at the same time here. So that's the double diamond, and it's a good illustration of design process, splitting it really into four basic stages. So discover, define, develop, and deliver. So for today, we're really going to concentrate on the discover and the define stages. So discover and define, I suppose, as you can see above there, are doing the right things before you get into doing things right. So doing the right things, I've seen loads and loads of examples of projects that design and engineer a really elegant solution till something that maybe isn't the right problem, or that they're solving the wrong problem, or it's something that people aren't really bothered about. It isn't a problem. So the place to start, and I suppose the focus of the day, is doing the right things before you get into doing things right. So focusing on discover and define before we get to the stage of problem definition, and then doing things right. So a lot of projects you see start there. They start in the middle with the problem definition. The most successful projects start on the very left-hand side, where before you get into the solution space, which is on the right-hand side, you really think about what your actual problem is and you do some research around that. So I suppose that's the key to what we're trying to get across, is starting at the start, and instead of jumping to the first solution, really doing your research, working through discover and define, and then make sure you're delivering on the right problem. Okay. So again, starting on the left-hand side, ask, sort, and listen, or ask, listen, and sort. So asking the question, go out and speaking to your user, listening to what they have to say, observing them, and then sorting all that info into something more usable. So, okay, so this was maybe on my first slide. This is what's known as the Design Squiggle, and it's really just it's just an illustration of the design process, that it's not a linear thing. And you sometimes hear it referred to as the fuzzy front end, and I suppose this bit on the left-hand side, and the define and the discover and define stages are that fuzzy front end, where it's not linear, it's really messy, it can be complex, you can feel like you're a wee bit lost at times and running down blind alleys. But as you work through the process, it starts to tease itself out, and eventually you get to a little bit of clarity at the end, I suppose. So yeah, you start with noise, uncertainty, patterns, and insight. You work through the discover and then the synthesis stages until you get to your concept, your prototype, and then hopefully a successful design after all that. Okay, so so the discover is the first stage of this, is conducting user research, and this is the part that I find maybe a lot of projects are lacking in, where they've started too far along the process and they haven't done their due diligence with their user research, finding out what the problem is, finding out what affects their users, empathizing with them, and really getting to the crux of what needs solved. And then you're moving on to define. So once you've done that, it's then taking all that info that you've gathered and really focusing it down into what problem can I solve with my product, or what solution am I trying to get to. Okay, so again, ask, listen, sort. So then you get to the problem definition, where we are in the center. So problem definition is a concise, well-defined problem statement that helps the designer to understand the problem and acts as a guide to developing the solution. So it's really taking all that messy info that you gather at the start, and then focus down into what really is the problem that you're trying to focus on what are you trying to solve. So again, a quote just from Einstein that again sort of illustrates that quite nicely. If I had only 1 hour to save the world, I'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution. So maybe one you've heard before, but really fits in here. Really spend the time, and it's something that often is neglected, doing that research, really focusing on what the problem is, what needs solved. And then just quickly to run through the other stages, develop is then generating ideas, generating prototypes, seeing what works, seeing what sticks, and working through that process before you move on to deliver, where it's really then focusing on refining your idea and getting to something where you're close to market and something you can get out there and into the world and hopefully make some money on. Okay, so Just lastly, it's not a sort of straight line process, even though it's sort of illustrated like that, where you work through discover, define, develop, deliver. There is sort of, it's iterative. You'll drop back and forward between different stages. Sometimes you'll have to go back from develop to define and rethink things. You may get down through prototyping stage and you'll have to cycle back. So even the double diamond is a great sort of guide, but it's by no means a linear process where you just work from one stage to the other, and once one's done, that's apart. It doesn't just work as nicely as that. Okay, so we'll start at the beginning and maybe work through some of these things. So discover, as I said, conducting your user research, understanding the problem, gathering as much information as possible about your user, and as you can see, there's sort of it's a diamond shape because there's a flare and focus to it. So the first stage, you're flaring out, you're gathering as much information as you possibly can before you move on to the next stage, where then you're focusing again until a singular sort of problem statement. So again, this is from IDEO, and it's called the three lenses of innovation. So some of you may have seen it before. So feasibility, desirability, viability. So desirable, people want it. So the human aspect till the project. Feasible, can we actually do it? So the technical aspect to it, is this feasible to do? And viable, we won't go broke doing it. So the sort of business side of things. And it's important that any project, ticks all those boxes. And really, this is the sweet spot. This is where you want your project to be, somewhere in the middle there, where those three lenses overlap. But we want to start here. So we want to start with desirability. Now, that's not to say that desirability and the human aspect of it is the most important, but it's the most important one to start with. So it's really where you want to be starting your project. So you want to be making sure that this is something that people want. This is, meeting a real human and unmet need, and before you start to consider the other things. Okay. So if there's any questions at any stage, you want to pop them into the chat, by all means do that, and we can pick them up at the end. I know I'm rattling through some of this stuff quite quickly, so if you have any queries or you want to, you want me to go back over anything, stick it in the chat. So I suppose starting with micro research. So that micro research is just something, and I'm sure anybody that has any sort of business idea or product idea does this to some extent, looking what's already out there, and it's an important thing to do. Fall down that Google or YouTube rabbit hole of seeing what's out there, what other products are in that area, see what trends are there, facts, stats, and patterns. If you can pull up any reports on a particular problem, do some digging into what's already out there. It's important that you already do that. Is there any other key stats or previous research already been done? What are your competitors doing? Have they addressed this issue already? What solutions are already out there? If you look outside maybe your own field, is there anything that sort of works in a similar way that that could be transferred across? If there are already solutions out there that are addressing the same problem, what are the good and bad points there, and is there maybe potential for innovation in that space? Are there any sort of regulatory or social or cultural factors to consider? So are there any laws surrounding it? Are there any sort of issues around culturally or socially within a country that may affect any solution or any innovation you're going to apply here? And then things like stakeholder mapping. So who are involved here? Who are your user? Who's going to fund it? Who are the competitors? Looking at the whole sort of bigger picture of who's involved there. So that's micro research. Okay, so when you're doing research, I suppose it can fall into two pretty broad categories: quantitative and qualitative. So in a very basic terms, I suppose quantitative can be counted, it can be measured, it can be expressed in numbers. Qualitative is a wee bit more descriptive, it's a wee bit more maybe conceptual. and we would maybe harder to quantify at times. So if quantitative tells us the what and the how many, the qualitative tells us why. And when you want to get to a really innovative product, the why is a really important thing to try and find out, and we'll come back to that. So it shouldn't be one or the other. It should be a blended approach to you. So you want to have, some hard numbers, but you also want to delve into the stories behind why people want this problem solved, what the real issues are, what are the real human needs of the user, what do they really want to get out of your product, what issues are they really having. So the qualitative should try and help us understand that. The quantitative will help us back it up with maybe some numbers, and with some maybe wider contextual stuff. So this is an important thing, I suppose, to remember when you start. You may feel that you've got a good grasp of your problem and you understand what you think people want, but this is unlikely to be the case. And it's probably the case on a very small number of cases. Have you talked to your user? So who are you making this product for? Who are you designing this service for? And have you talked to them? Have you asked them what their goals are, what their frustrations are, what their need for the product is? And if you haven't, that's the place to start. So just a few, again, quickly, it's a wee bit of a maybe crash course in this, but start with an interview. There's no better way to understand hopes, desires, and aspirations of those you're designing for than by talking to them directly. So if we're talking about human-centered design, start with the humans that are going to use your product, use your service. Go and speak to them. And I know this is something people are maybe reluctant to do at an early stage. You're afraid of letting the idea out of the bag, the great idea that you have, or you're afraid of maybe looking stupid. But get out there, get into the field, speak to the people that ultimately are going to be using or ultimately going to be buying your product. So it can be a wee bit daunting, an interview, if you haven't done it. Try and keep it informal. Try and get the people who are actually our users, speak to them, and it can really unlock all sorts of sort of insights and things you'll never get sitting behind a desk and on Google searches. You'll learn so much about their mindset, their behavior, their lifestyle, where your product or your service will fit into that, and what can make the difference between being a really successful service or product and what's something that people don't really care about or don't really want to use. So get out, interview them, have a broad topic guide to start with, that sort of steers it in the general direction of what the information you want to gain, but it's not a case of just ticking off, it's not an interrogation. You want to give them a wee bit of scope to really explain how they feel about it. You really want to hear about the world as they see it and how the problem they're having as they see it, that this is the problem that you're trying to solve. So have a broad guide, but take notes, record it if you can. I know it's difficult to get out and do it face to face at the minute, so if you're doing it over Zoom or Teams or whatever, try and record it and maybe and go back to it. So the 5 whys, I suppose, within the interview, if you're speaking to someone, it's a pretty popular concept you may have come across before, the thing about the 5 whys. It can help you uncover deep motivations and assumptions that underpin somebody's behavior. So why are they doing something? You can ask really high-level questions, but if you start to ask why, you can really get down into the real, I suppose, the real good stuff of why. But why is that? Why do you feel like that? Why do you not like using this product? Why is this an issue for you? And again, if you're not used to it, you can feel quite stupid doing this, and it's a difficult thing maybe to get your head around. But once you start with broad questions and then get into the whys of it, you can really get some nice insights and really pick out things that can set your product apart from other things in the market and get you really to the crux of the problem you're trying to solve. So again, my little animated GIFs aren't working. But leave in comfortable silences. Be comfortable with it. It allows you to tease out details. I don't know if any of you ever watch Tommy Tiernan doing his interview show on RTE. He's not afraid to allow uncomfortable silences, and by doing that, sometimes people expand on things that they wouldn't normally. They'll give you maybe the stock answer. If you give them a bit of space, they'll usually come back and maybe expand on it, and that's where you get the key stuff of, that's really what I need to know to design a really good product and really design something that's going to be really useful to them. So allow them that space to do that. Some of the most important questions you're going to have in your interview are why. Tell me a wee bit more about that. Why do you think that is? Things like that. So start on the broad topics and then start to really drill down into it as you work through it. I suppose when you're doing things like interviews, it's important and it's very easy to introduce your own bias into it. So you may have your own idea, like we talked about at the start, your preconceived what the solution will be, and your own human nature is to try and steer them towards that. And it's an important thing not to do that. You want to hear what their issues are, what they want solved, and you're trying to address their problem, not sort of impose your point of view and your preconceived solution on their problem. So observe them, get out and watch them. If it's a task-oriented thing that you're trying to solve, watch them doing it at the minute. If you're coming up with a product that's going to help somebody do a task, watch them doing it. See how they do it. It's amazing sometimes what you can uncover by doing that. Apply fresh eyes, I suppose, to the problem. Observe everything they do. Take notes, things like that. So again, can be a really powerful way of doing that. I think we've got a wee video here to try and illustrate that. If I can, Nick, if you want to just let me know if this plays okay, we can get the video. So it's just a very short video. This is from Tom Kelly at IDEO. And it just illustrates really the power of observing somebody in the field and doing that wee piece of research before you sit down to try and design something to solve their problem.
About 10 years ago, we got approached by one of the largest oral healthcare companies in America, a company you've probably heard of called Oral-B.
One of the largest
we'd like a new
oral healthcare companies in America,
because
you've probably heard of called
Oral-B.
Oral-B.
To get commoditized.
And they said,
look, looks like a lot of
we'd
kids'
like a new
toothbrushes out there,
toothbrush.
And you can't have that. We want to be special.
Ours is starting to get commoditized.
So we say,
it looks like a lot of kids' toothbrushes out there, and you can't have that. We want to be special.
Right? And they're kind
so
of
we say,
not sure about that.
We'll do this. We want to go out in the field and do some field research.
How hard could that be?
And they're kind of not sure about that. Like, it's not rocket science. We're talking about kids brushing their teeth. How hard could that be?
But we want to go through this process, this observation
stop fooling around and start designing.
Always you can
right? But we want to go through this process,
so we go out,
and
we're on like the first day
almost
of
always you can spot
and we make a small discovery.
And so we go out, and we're on like the first day of observation.
Every kid's toothbrush in the history of the world has had the same implicit assumption.
Every kid's toothbrush in the history of the world has had the same implicit assumption.
Which is the assumption.
It's a logical assumption. It just
have big hands, kids have small hands, and so when you want to make the kids' version, make it like the parents' brush, only smaller and skinnier.
And so when you want to make the kids' version, make it like the parents' brush,
in the field,
only smaller and skinnier.
Until you actually watch humans,
perfectly logical,
little tiny humans,
until you go out in the field.
About 10 years ago, we got approached by one of the largest oral healthcare companies in America, a company you've probably heard of called Oral-B, and they said, look, we'd like a new kids' toothbrush, because ours is starting to get commoditized. It looks like a lot of kids' toothbrushes out there, and you can't have that. We want to be special, right? So we say, okay, we'll do this. We want to go out in the field and do some field research. And they're kind of not sure about that. Like, it's not rocket science. We're talking about kids brushing their teeth. How hard could that be, right? They would really like us to stop fooling around and start designing, right? But we want to go through this process, this observation process, because we think almost always you can spot opportunities. And so we go out, and we're on like the first day of observations, and we make a small discovery. The small discovery we make is that every kid's toothbrush in the history of the world has had the same implicit assumption. It's a logical assumption, it just isn't exactly right, which is the assumption always was parents have big hands, kids have small hands, and so when you want to make the kids' version, make it like the parents' brush, only smaller and skinnier. Perfectly logical until you go out in the field. Until you actually watch humans, little tiny humans, brushing their teeth. And what you notice right away, you get a 5-year-old boy brushing his teeth, he's not holding his toothbrush in his fingertips the way mom and dad do, he's fisting it. He's holding it like this because he doesn't have the dexterity, he doesn't have the fine motor controls that his parents have, and so he's got to hold it like this. In fact, the other thing he does is he holds the brush too far up very frequently, and so he's punching himself in the face as he's trying to brush his teeth, and we solved that problem too. But the main thing was, came back in the field and said, uh-oh, kids don't need little skinny toothbrushes, kids need big fat toothbrushes, right? Let's make them big fat squishy toothbrushes. And you may have noticed, now every toothbrush company in the world makes these, but our client reports that after we made that little tiny discovery, out in the field, sitting in a bathroom watching a 5-year-old boy brush his teeth, they had the best-selling kids' toothbrush in the world for 18 months. So when you think about power, when you think about credibility, if you could go out in the field and do that observation and come up with that finding, and your company, your organization was the best in its field for 18 months afterwards, would that be worth it? I think that would be worth it. And so that's this message about think like a traveler, be an anthropologist, use your powers of observation, have that part of your brain turned up as high as you can all along.
Okay, hopefully that's us back. Sorry, I think we had some sound issues during that, but hopefully everybody got there and was able to watch and listen to the video in the end. That's a video I use quite a bit, but I think it's just a really nice illustration of the power of getting out into the field and observing the user, observing people trying to deal with the problem you're trying to solve, or carrying out the task that your problem or service relates to. So it's a really powerful thing to get out in the wild and actually see people doing that. Okay, so we've been out in the wild, we've done our interviews, we've done all our micro research. What do we do with it all? How do we synthesize all this down until something usable? And sometimes you can end up with loads and loads of data, and you get to this stage of the process and you can feel a wee bit overwhelmed and a wee bit lost by it all. So you need to try and organize it, get it into some sort of usable form, try and make sense of it in form of sort of user insights and something that you can really focus your design on. So there's a lot of sort of tools you can use, and we'll quickly run through a few of them. So again, if we're thinking about the Design Squiggle, like we mentioned earlier, synthesis is, I suppose, about untangling all the info that you've gathered up and trying to make sense of it and trying to work through into the concept and prototyping stage. So things like empathy maps, again, we'll not spend an awful lot of time on them because we could do a half-hour webinar on some of these on their own. But empathy maps, taking your general data, the age, sex, family, income, all that sort of demographic stuff, put it in the middle of the person, and then working around what do these people think and feel, what's their ambitions, what makes them feel good and bad, what do they want to change, all those sorts of things. What do they see? What does their environment look like? Where do they work? What type of things do they use? What do they say and do? what kind of attitudes they have, what does their environment say and do. You know, there's loads of little different sort of prompts there that you can work through. What do they hear? What do they hear from their friends? Who influences them? You know, who do they work with? All those sorts of things. And then you can start once you start to fill some of these things in, then you can start to think about what are the gains? What does your audience really want? What's their goal? What do they want to reach? How do they measure success in something? What's their desires? What's their needs? And what their pain points are. So what are their fears, frustrations, obstacles, challenges? You know, this all maybe sounds a wee bit woolly when it comes to, you know, a specific product. But if you can really understand the underlying motivations of why someone's trying to do something, you can ultimately design a better product or a better service to address that. So again, just another tool. Things like empathy maps is one, journey maps is another one. So journey maps, it can lend itself really well, particularly maybe till service design, but it can be applied to pretty much anything. So this example is someone shopping for a new car. So, you know, where do they start? What's the first thing that happens? You know, they maybe see an advert on TV, and so you just maybe speak to someone and interview them about this process, and you know, put in these points on the map. You know, at what stage they do this, how long is the journey? Sometimes things like buying a car could be, you know, months from the first considering buying a car to they actually, you know, hand over the money on the forecourt. So what does this journey look like? What are the highs and lows of it? What are the pain points? And by doing this, you can maybe identify areas that you can really set yourself apart from the competition. So if it's a pain point that you can solve, this is a reason to use your product or service as opposed to someone else's. If there's something that somebody really likes doing in a journey or a task, and you can sort of amplify that and make that a bigger part of your offering, again, that can sort of set you apart from somebody in the competition. So it can be a useful thing to do as well. User personas. So user personas, I suppose after you interview a section of your users, a user persona is really a fictional character that you sort of come up with. It's usually like a composite of the people that you've spoken to that you think will be your user. And it's just a useful sort of touch point to come back where you can say, well, in this case, Clark Andrews, would Clark Andrews use my product? What would his thoughts be on this? And it's always useful to have that user persona where you can go back to and think, you know, am I solving this problem for my user? Now, one user persona isn't going to encapsulate everyone, but it's important maybe to pick out who your key user is, who your key customer is, and really focusing on designing a really good solution for them. So sometimes you maybe have a primary and a secondary user, and you maybe come up with a couple of user personas, but don't try and solve the problem. Sometimes you hear it, oh, well, everyone will use my product, so I'm going to try and design it for everyone. But who are your core user group? Who are the biggest group of people that are gonna you know, buy your product? Maybe that's what you find out in your user research. That maybe comes from your demographics of, you know, it's a male aged 20 to 30 or whatever the demographic is. So that's where you sort of focus in your user persona on it, and then try and really focus on design the perfect solution for them, and then everyone else, then you can try and make it as good as possible for them. Okay, so just when we're thinking about things like user personas, there's another sort of useful tool called user need insight. So really basic again, but it's just a nice way of maybe framing the problem for you sometimes. So if we're thinking about, in this example, we're looking at, we want teenagers to eat healthier food. So we maybe found out in our micro research that we've got a stat. I've got a stat here. The National Institute of Mental Health reports that 2.7% of teens aged 13 to 18 struggle with an eating disorder. So we're looking to address this problem. We're looking to design some sort of solution or some sort of product or service that maybe addresses that. So if we were to just jump into this without really talking to our user, to really looking at their underlying needs. We'd apply something like, as a teenager, we need them to eat healthy, and the insight is, certain nutrients are necessary for physical and cognitive health developments. All very dry, all very not incorrect, but doesn't really get you to where you want to be in terms of understanding what the user's real needs are. So after maybe speaking to them, I'm drawing out their underlying needs and motivations. It should look maybe something a wee bit more like this, where you've got your user persona. It's a 14-year-old girl in a new school, so you've got a specific user. What she needs is to feel socially accepted while eating healthy food. So that's her need, not one we've come up with for her. And then the insight is, in her group, a social risk is more dangerous than a health risk. So the peer pressure is more important to her than the long-term health. So without understanding all that and without really understanding that user, it would be really difficult to design any sort of solution to this issue around healthy eating for teenagers. So hopefully that sort of shows the power of maybe going and speaking to them, really doing some observation work and trying to really get to the underlying issue of what problem you're trying to solve and how you can go about that it's going to be a successful solution and not just imposing your preconceptions on the problem. Okay. So maybe once we've done all that, we can get to the point where we're trying to frame our problem. And a nice way to do that a lot of the time is using how might we statements. So how might we do this? So every problem is an opportunity for design. So by framing your challenge as a how might we question, you can set yourself up for an innovative solution. So you use this format because it suggests a solution is possible, and it gives you the opportunity to maybe answer it in a variety of ways, not really sort of penning you into one preconceived solution. So if you start with framing your problem and think about, I'm sure you all have an idea or product, something in mind when you're attending webinars like this. So maybe think of your problem in those terms. How might we address this specific part of it? So make sure they're not too broad, but at the same time, don't focus them in too much that it sort of it filters out all opportunity for real innovation and to do something different. So there's maybe you're going to have to throw out an awful lot of how might we statements around your problem before you get one and go, yeah, if I could solve that would be something that would really get us to an innovative solution. Okay. So how can I apply this to my problem? So there's no, I suppose, strict list of methods. The double diamond is a nice guide to try and guide you through it and make sure that you at least try and address the steps as best you can. But like I said before, it's not a straight line solution. There's no strict paths or methods. I've showed you some tools here. Some of them may fit and some of them may not. It's up to you really to pick out what you think is useful to your process and apply that. Some of them lean a wee bit more towards maybe service design. Some of them lean a wee bit more towards physical product design. Some of them fit in different ways. So pick out what's applicable, I suppose, to your problem and apply them as you see fit. But the thing to remember is keep going back till your how might we and go back to your point of view statement. And then is my solution, is my idea addressing both of those? And if it's not, do I need to tweak that? Do I need to rethink that? Okay, so if you're interested in a wee bit more on this, there's loads and loads of stuff out there. A couple of books on sort of sources that I found particularly useful and particularly interesting. IDEO, so the IDEO website or the IDEO website, and those two books, Tim Brown, who's CEO of IDEO, and anything by Tom and David Kelly, really interesting in that sort of space. The design of everyday things by Don Norman. Don Norman was the head of experience design for Apple. So really some really good stuff in that, and it's quite an old book now, but it's, you know, a lot of the concepts are all based on that. So the Design Council website's got some good stuff, and again, IDEO, the design kit, sort of talks you through a lot of these tools. So if that designkit.org, if you want to follow that up. Okay, thank you very much. That's pretty much me. It was a wee bit of a whistle-stop tour on some of this stuff, but I suppose there will be an opportunity for me to speak to you and maybe do some one-to-one work where we can work it through with your specific problem, your business or your idea, and we can work through it in a wee bit more depth and apply it. But maybe Nick will go through that with us.
Thanks a lot, Damien. Fantastic. If you've got a question, please do drop it into the chat, and we'll get to it if we've got the time. As I mentioned at the top of the call, my name's Nick Bridgepole, and I'm the Business Development Executive with the Belfast Met. We have a couple funding streams that we can help you guys with. Firstly, Damien, I'd like to say fantastic webinar. From a sales and marketing background, I could see a lot of crossover. You know, things like interviews, customer journeys, user personas, or as the marketing teams would normally call it, customer profiles. I really do see the benefit in a user-centric design, specifically because it sort of looks at what you're delivering and gets you to think about how is this product going to address a problem, but also how is it going to make money as well, like a fully commercialized product. So it was really interesting for me to see that. And look, once again, if any of you have any questions, do drop it into the chat. Damien had touched on with some of you may have a product in mind that you'd like to develop, and I'm going to now discuss how we can help. The Belfast Met has 4 funding streams for businesses. They fall into 2 sorts of buckets. The buckets are funding where we can teach you how to do something, and funding where we can do something for you. So the first funding stream that I'm going to discuss is Skills Focus. It's funded by the Department for the Economy, and companies will receive 100% funding to support the cost of training. To be eligible for funding as a company, you must be based in Northern Ireland and have under 250 employees. And we offer courses in a broad range of subjects, things like financial, business, and professional services, digital and creative services, advanced manufacturing, materials and engineering, design, construction, and materials handling. It's a lot to take in at this point. So if you do feel like you can avail of any of these funding streams, please do get in contact with us, and I will drop my email address into the chat. The second funding stream is an innovation voucher, and this is provided through Invest in I, where as a business you can receive £5,000 of support from the Belfast Met to provide knowledge and expertise to tackle a specific business issue. So this is where you would be awarded a voucher and we would do work for you. This would fall under new and improved products, processes, and services. It would also involve access to specialist information or expertise on new materials. And it's really all about tapping into the Belfast Met's expertise in research and science. The third funding that I'm going to talk to you about is Innovate Us. Now, this is a fully funded skills development program, which is specific to companies under 50 employees. It's funded by the Department for the Economy, and its aim is to deliver bespoke training solutions to encourage and enable businesses to bring an idea to the market. It can either be a new product, a new process, or a new service. It normally takes the form of anywhere between 10 and 60 hours of fully funded training. Finally, we're going to talk about Connected. And Connected is really about what it says on the tin. It's connecting businesses with academia, and it allows the Belfast Met to share with businesses expertise, research capabilities, and facilities to businesses. We have a brand new 3D printing lab for any of those that are interested, and we would be happy to share those facilities with you guys. We work with businesses in the areas of emerging technologies and new product development. And as Damien said, there may be some of you looking to develop a new product. Damien has kindly offered up some of his time to provide one-to-one workshops with any of you that would be interested. This would look like a consultancy basis where you and Damien would really do a deep dive into your idea or product and look at some of the things that he's talked about today. For example, you might have a product that you're looking to prototype. You might have an idea that you're looking to define as a problem solution. Things like synthesis and empathy maps might come into play as well. So if any of this has been of any interest to you, please don't hesitate to get into contact. You can contact me at nbridgepole@belfastmet.com. And I don't think we have the SEDC email address up there, but that's okay. I'll drop that into the chat now. And we also have Damien's email address there as well. Any questions at all? Okay, so we have a couple questions here, Damien. I think we've got.
I've got a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just see a couple coming through here. Yeah. So if you've got several ideas, how do you prioritize them? Good question. I suppose the thing to do with
Hey. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, I'm gone. I'm back.
Damien, you there? I was just about to answer that question for you.
Okay. Well, feel free. Sorry, I think I just got cut off there. Yeah. If you've got several ideas, I suppose working through the important thing, I suppose, about the double diamond is this idea of failing early and failing cheaply. So work through those ideas. It doesn't cost an awful lot to get out and speak to users. It doesn't cost an awful lot to spend some time on the ideas, gather as much information as you can, try and work through the discover and define stages. And then by the time you get through those, you will have a fair idea on which ideas have legs and which won't. So, sometimes then they'll get into prototyping stage and you'll maybe test them out a wee bit further and see if they've got legs. Sometimes you'll find once you get through the previous two stages, you'll discover, this has already been done, or this isn't an issue for people, or sometimes you start to discover that what you thought was a problem is slightly different, and it helps you to reframe them a wee bit. So I would just work through those and hopefully get to a stage where then you can pick the sort of the more pressing problems and the ones you think has got the most potential. So I think I've lost the chat now where the questions were dropped in. I think we had another one. What What's the other question? Maybe can you still see the questions, Nick?
I think it was the same question. It was just the same question from Greg.
Okay.
He had just typed it twice.
Okay. I think I had another one that was typed directly to me. So, Greg, if you want to pop it back in. It was interesting, Nick, you just mentioned about some of the marketing overlap, and there certainly is an awful lot of overlaps between the ways things are done sometimes with marketing and things like that. I suppose the key difference is marketing is making people want things, and design is making things people want. So that's the sort of difference there. But a lot of the sort of the tools that can be applied are the same, because in marketing you really want to find out who's buying my product, why are they buying my product, who am I trying to appeal to, all those sorts of things. But if you can do that way back at the design stage, before you get to the stage where you're just trying to flog something to somebody that they may or may not want, if you can really build that into your product from the very start, that's a lot more powerful than trying to fix it then in your marketing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the age-old conundrum, isn't it? Like you find that you're either flogging something that nobody wants, and then going back and trying to figure out what it is that you want. It's never the user-based way. And how old is the user-centric design? Is this a fairly new sort of way?
No. The Double Diamond, I think, is probably about 20 years old now from the Design Council. IDEO are the guys behind design thinking, and it's been knocking around since the 90s probably as well. But it's starting to really become, people are starting to see the benefits of it in wider business, in right across service design, product design, designing how their business operates, all sorts of things, and applying those sorts of principles right across. So it's become a wee bit more ubiquitous now than it used to be. Again, that book that I recommended by Don Norman isn't a new one. I think there's a sort of rewrite of it that's a wee bit more up to date, but it's again, nothing about 15-20 years, so it's not a new thing, but it's starting to become a wee bit more mainstream, I suppose. The other question, I think, was around interviews. I think someone had asked about your interview questions. Do you ask really specific questions? I would tend to say not, to start with the broad topics. So say, for example, your product is related to something like recycling. You're designing a bit of recycling equipment or a service around recycling or something. Rather than trying to lead the interview too much, start really broad and say, tell me about your recycling, and tell me about how you do that at the minute. And then start with the whys. Why do you do that? How do you find that? Tell me a wee bit more about that. And it'll sort of naturally start to drill into it without you leading them towards what you think your solution should be. So again, it's very difficult not to introduce your own bias when you're doing things like that. Things like recycling is really difficult, isn't it? Tell me about that. And you've already led them down a path where they're going to describe the hassles they have with recycling, rather than them really telling you about their real lived experience. So start with the broad questions and allow that to maybe steer it a wee bit, but try not to be too specific. See where they go with it, and then maybe towards the end introduce a few more specific questions. One thing you shouldn't ask is, would you buy this? Or here's my idea, what do you think? Because people won't tell you the truth. They'll usually say, oh yeah, that sounds interesting. You'll never get a really would you buy this? So you go, oh yeah, I probably would. And they may or may not, and it doesn't really tell you anything about whether your solution's any good or not, or what areas to improve. You just get a sort of fudged answer. So try and steer away from those sort of questions. I think that was it.
Fantastic. What I would recommend to the two people who asked questions, Damien, is that they either contact myself or yourself directly in order to schedule some time to really tease out what it is that they're trying to do. So you can see Damien's email address there at dmcilroy@belfastmet.ac.uk, as well as mine. I've dropped it into the chat. If there are no other questions, we'll end it there. Thank you guys very much for your time.
Thanks,
And
guys.
just a quick plug, we have our next webinar coming up next week. I believe it's on a Wednesday. Do look at your social media channels for that one as well, too. Okay, thank you guys.
Thanks.
Bye.